Hey there, thanks so much for joining me again. Today I am sharing some of the things I learned this past weekend working with the score editor in Cubase. And specifically, I had an old project that I had written in Dorico about 8 or 9 months ago that I really wanted to add some more sort of hybrid layers to. And it didn't make sense with some of those instruments, synths and such like that, to try to notate them in Dorico. I wanted to work with them in Cubase. I already had some really nice track presets and effects chains to work with them in Cubase. And so what I wanted to do was bring the notation in, but there was quite a lot of it. And it was also in unfamiliar instruments, non-Western instruments that Cubase did not automatically recognize. All of that led me to really doing a deep dive over the weekend into how articulations do and do not get ported over, because these non-traditional or non-Western instruments didn't have, staccato, tenuto, things like that. They had definitely custom playback techniques. So I had to do kind of a deep dive into really getting those working. I wanted to share some of what I've learned, what works and what doesn't work. And I made a couple of discoveries that I hope for many of you out there will really be kind of like an aha moment. I'm going to jump into my desktop here, and let me actually throw on my headphones so I can make sure I hear what you guys are hearing. So I'm just going to play this little tune here. So I've done something very purposeful here, which is I've used extremely simple and very common articulations: accent, staccato, tenuto, and marcato. The reason that I'm using those is that I discovered in the course of trying to get everything ported over that these actually port over seamlessly from Dorico into Cubase. So check this out. When you create a project that uses these over here, so these sort of, I guess, essential or very most basic ones. I didn't really have any luck with the stressed and unstressed, but the staccato tenuto also works. So the ones that are right here, you'll also find them in Cubase, right here in the score editor. So you'll see them right here. And what I discovered was that if you, whatever basic and essential articulations you use in your music will import, and it's not only cosmetic. If you actually create an expression map that ties into those articulations, then Cubase will actually set it all up for you. So let me just kind of show you. I've done a little bit of this behind the scenes because I didn't want to spend too much time in this video kind of like clicking between windows, right? But what I did was I set up Stradivari violin, the NI library here, with just a few obvious articulations, just a sustain, a tenuto, a staccato, and a marcato. And I built a very basic expression map in Dorico to make that work, and just kind of wanted to prove the concept. So when we look over here, we can see it switching. Right. Now, when I save this project, okay, and I go over to Cubase, and I go to the File menu to import, and I go down to Dorico project, and then I select that Dorico project. First of all, there's a really nice thing that's happened here. Where am I? I'm in live streams. This really cool thing that happens, which is that now it asks you if there are multiple flows in your project, which flow you want to incorporate, which is really nice. I'm going to go ahead in here, open that up. So check this out. It asks which flow you want. That was not the case with early Cubase 14. So that's actually really nice, because it used to only import the first flow, which was problematic. So anyway, if I go ahead and click that, then I get this MIDI import, right? And if I were to look at that in the score editor, let me bring that up here. you can see that it's imported all of the same articulations, Marcato, Tenuto, but it does not work with custom playing techniques, unfortunately. Custom techniques, custom playing or playback techniques does not work, but the essential playback techniques that exist in the left-hand toolbar in Dorico and then along the top in the Score Editor, these ones right here. These ones right here, from accent over to the unstressed. I've only really worked with these first 6. I don't think the stressed and unstressed really, they don't seem to really trigger anything. Even in Dorico, I don't think you can actually tie them to an expression map. I think they're just cosmetic even in Dorico. But as long as you're using these very familiar ones like accent, staccato, tenuto, and marcato, they not only work, but then if you come over here and I could load up this little expression map that I made for this example. So right, it's just got the basic staccato, tenuto, marcato. That was, I don't need that, and natural, right? And I'm just using key switches here because it was a little quicker to set up with this particular library. This particular library doesn't really cover, or it doesn't allow CC switching. But once you have that very basic thing set up, check it out. Once you select that for your track, and you see over here on the left, in the left zone, you see how that's arranged. If I play this back, you'll see that this is switching through automatically without me having to go and change anything in the key editor. I don't have to go in down here. You can even see that they've been assigned in the articulations here. You can see them written into the MIDI notes, and all that happens with the essential, most basic ones automatically. So what doesn't work? What doesn't work is, unfortunately, custom articulations, which for my work that I did over the weekend was frustrating, right? I think what's happening here is that the way that Cubase's expression maps are designed, they are designed to embed things into MIDI. So they are sort of like a wrapper that goes around your MIDI. In Dorico, it's not about MIDI, it's about notation. So everything in the Dorico software is designed around facilitating notation, clean notation, detailed notation. And then it translates that notation into MIDI to play it back. But in Cubase, there's none of that notation layer really. So what tends to happen when you import things from Dorico is that you'll get cosmetic articulations. For example, something that's not an attribute-based, like it's a direction-based articulation like pizzicato or spiccato, something that starts here and continues until it's changed, that's direction-based. That direction type does not import at all. None of these essential basic articulations that are available in that top toolbar are direction-based. They're all attribute-based, meaning that you have to apply them to each individual note. Now, both Cubase and Dorico recognize this differentiation between attribute and direction type articulations, but they're for entirely different purposes. In Dorico, it's for notation accuracy, and in Cubase, it's about wrapping your MIDI with further information. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about dynamics on Thursday, because I also made some discoveries about dynamics. The story there is a bit more complicated, in some ways better, in some ways worse. But I thought this was really an important discovery. I think most of us know that we can't get custom articulations to just import easily into Cubase, and that's unfortunate. In my case, I was using a library that had a variety of instruments. I was using the Middle East library from Native Instruments, and it has a set of triggers, a set of key switches that are common to all their instruments, to all of their melodic instruments have the same key switch set, and all of their percussion instruments have the same key switch set. And so what happened there was it was very straightforward. I did not have to create very complicated expression maps in Cubase, and I got it done in about an hour. It was, not as nice as just importing, but it wasn't actually that bad. Symbols and the ability to create glyphs and special symbols in Dorico, much more flexible than what you can do in Cubase, so my score looks nicer in Dorico. But of course, I would expect that to be so. The main thing that I think one wants to take away from this is that when you are using those essential techniques, playback techniques, playing techniques, they do port seamlessly from Dorico into Cubase if you have an expression map in Cubase loaded that recognizes them. And since it's such a small subset, coming up with that expression map for any library shouldn't take more than a few minutes. So it actually can be a big help. Now, I also wanted to suggest a little bit of a workaround for more custom articulations. And that is, since we know that we've got 5 or 6 articulations that are universal between Dorico and Cubase, you could actually, if in a pinch, I'm not saying this is great workflow, but in a pinch, if you've got a big piece of music and, you're using a lot of unique articulations, like some sort of, very specific mordant or something like that, you could always just basically assign that mordant as staccato or one of these 6 basics. It's going to get it into Cubase. It's going to assign it to all the right notes. It's going to import that information. And then in Cubase, you can go back and switch them back to mordants, right? So there is maybe a fine sort of find and replace. It's certainly not as easy as find and replace. You have to go through, it's still quite manual. But if you had a large piece of music and you were trying to get playback to work, you can just say, hey, all staccato notes, instead of triggering that staccato key switch, trigger this mordant key switch. And then you don't even have to change the cosmetic view of the staccato notes. So I thought I'd offer that insight as I was thinking about more complicated projects that I work on and wondering how could I get the notation to just render correctly in Cubase. That approach appealed to me, of actually just use the 6 basic articulations in Dorico that I know will import into Cubase as my sort of vocabulary for getting them in. Once they're in Cubase, I can trigger any key switch I want with them. So I can just decide, my staccatos, they're all going to play mordants, and my tenutos, they're all going to play X, So hopefully maybe that's insightful. Last thing I wanted to talk about for maybe people who are less experienced with this question is, why would you need to work with Dorico and Cubase? Some people who work with Dorico, they are just working in notation, and they are not particularly concerned about the production quality of their music. Maybe they're making mock-ups to share with an orchestra or an ensemble, but they're certainly not trying to make professional grade mock-ups, to get signed off by TV staff or directors and producers and things like that. So for those people, there's really not a lot of advantage to going into Cubase. In my workflow, I don't particularly like to write music into Cubase because MIDI is less intuitive to me than notated music. So I like to write in Dorico. But then Cubase has so many more features if you want to set up busing, you want to group different instruments into different submixes and buses, you want to make a no drums mix, a no melody mix, things like that. Doing that in Dorico, sometimes not possible, other times just very inconvenient. Dorico is not a robust busing and routing system. They don't have that sort of infrastructure, nor do they have effects channels, instrument channels, sampler tracks, all of those sorts of things. So coming into Cubase just opens up this enormous horizon of sound design, enormous horizon of what you can accomplish in your production as well as mixing and mastering. So that's why you might want to dive into using both softwares if you're not already. So thanks to those who are joining me this afternoon. I'm sorry that I am running late today. I am going to be on schedule on Thursday. I've been busy. I'm hoping that summer will let me go here in a little while and I can get back to something like normal schedule. But I will be back on Thursday. I'm going to talk about dynamics. So check that out. That'll be my next video on the channel. And if you have questions between then and now, please post in the comments. If you're new to the channel, like and subscribe, and I appreciate everybody's support. I'll see you on Thursday. All right, bye for now.